Hey guys, Robbie here from CrossFit South Bend. Today we are going to talk about leaky gut. More specifically, we're going to try to answer the question, what is leaky gut? This is a term that you may or may not have heard thrown around a lot in alternative medicine and functional medicine circles, and sometimes it can get a little bit confusing as to what this actually means. So today we're going to talk about what leaky gut actually is. We're going to answer the question, what is leaky gut? We're going to talk about what causes leaky gut. We're going to talk about why leaky gut is so bad, what symptoms it leads to, and what tests you can do to see if this is something you have. And then finally, we'll talk briefly about things you can do to go about fixing it. So, first of all, what is leaky gut? Well, the first thing to say is that leaky gut is really a colloquial term, like adrenal fatigue, for something that's really called intestinal permeability. If you were to go on to PubMed and try to look up leaky gut, you're not going to find anything. But if you look up intestinal permeability, you will find something. So leaky gut is just easier to say. It's easier for most people to understand, so I'm just going to refer to it that way. But really what we're talking about is intestinal permeability. So leaky gut is where your gut is leaky. But more specifically, it's where the lining of your small intestine, which is where most of the nutrients are absorbed in your body, goes from looking something like this, where things are held tightly together, to the point where it looks more like this, where it's more porous and things can seep through the mucosal lining of your small intestine. So in that case, things have gone really not well for your health insofar as this leads to too many bad things entering the bloodstream and too many good things not being able to be absorbed by your body. So in essence, your digestive tract has three main parts. It's got the stomach, where stomach acid release is released and things start to be broken down, but no nutrient absorption takes place in the stomach. Then you've got the small intestine, where almost all the nutrient absorption takes place, and where your body tries to keep things out of your bloodstream that should not be in your bloodstream. And then the large intestine, where you've got the vast majority of the bacteria in your digestive tract, and certain things ferment, and that's where you absorb water, and then eventually where things exit the body. The small intestine is really that area where you absorb most of your nutrients. And when we talk about leaky gut, we're specifically talking about the small intestine. Now, normally this lining of the small intestine should be able to absorb nutrients, and it should be held together pretty tightly so that undigested food particles and unwanted proteins and bacteria and fungi and yeast, things that aren't supposed to be in your bloodstream, stay out of your bloodstream. If you think about it, there's basically this hollow tube running from kind of the inside of your mouth all the way to the exit out the other end. That's actually technically outside of your body. Even though, we tend to think when we eat foods, it's technically inside your body. Technically, it's outside of your body until your body decides to let whatever you just ate into your bloodstream, certain nutrients that you need. But if this barrier gets compromised, things go bad. A very helpful way to think about this is leaky gut is kind of like not having a bouncer at the entrance to a club. The bouncer is supposed to keep bad people out and supposed to let good people in. That's exactly what the small intestine does for our body. It's supposed to let good nutrients into the body, and it's supposed to keep bad things out. When there's no more bouncer, anyone can get into the club. And when there's no more integrity to the intestinal lining, that can lead to chronic and systemic inflammation and impaired absorption of nutrients. So that's leaky gut in a nutshell. Too much bad stuff gets in, too much good stuff stays out because the lining of your small intestine is compromised. Now, what causes leaky gut? So many different things can cause leaky gut, but we're going to focus on just a few here. Now, the first column here is a set of lifestyle things. So a pro-inflammatory diet, lots of sugar, processed foods, soda, alcohol, things of that nature. Nutrient deficiencies can lead to a leaky gut. If you don't have enough of the nutrients necessary to help maintain the lining of your small intestine, that can lead to leaky gut. Lack of sleep, too much exercise, too little exercise, chronic stress, basically all things that lead to inflammation, things that lead to some sort of emergency state in the body. And it gets compounded further because not only do those things lead to leaky gut, but then leaky gut itself leads to further inflammation. So you have this vicious cycle of bad things going on. Things that tend to lead to leaky gut that not a lot of people are aware of, I would say, who haven't done much research on this, but you should know about prescription drugs. Now, you should never, ever, for any reason, stop, change, or otherwise modify any prescription that you're on without talking to your doctor. That being said, it has been shown many times over in the literature that prescription drugs can lead to compromised intestinal permeability. And this is something to talk about with your doctor if you suspect that there might be an issue going on. But again, you should never, ever, for any reason, stop, modify, or otherwise change your prescription dosage without talking to your doctor first. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, things like ibuprofen, Advil, things like that, can lead to leaky gut. Antibiotics, by destroying the good bacteria that are supposed to help maintain our gut, and by themselves being prescription drugs as well, lead to all sorts of leaky gut. Gut pathogens, things like Clostridium difficile, or H. pylori, or Giardia, or Cryptosporidium parvum. All of these things that you can get while traveling, or you can get after having some food poisoning and you think it's gone, but it really isn't. And it's just, these gut pathogens can be chronic in the sense that they don't make you feel like you're going to vomit all the time, but they lead to impaired nutrient absorption and chronic inflammation in the gut. So gut pathogens. Food sensitivities are a big one. There are lots of things that you can be sensitive to that aren't necessarily unhealthy, but if you happen to be sensitive to them, they can lead to all sorts of inflammation in the gut, a compromised immune system, and excess cortisol. So all of those things should look fairly familiar to you from other talks we've done, in the sense that these are the general contributors to inflammation and chronic health conditions to begin with. Now, there's some that are a little bit more specific than others to leaky gut, but those should look fairly familiar to you. So why is leaky gut so bad for your overall health? So we talked about this a little bit above, but just to recap and to synthesize it down, basically you get this awful double whammy. You get too much bad stuff entering the bloodstream and too little good stuff getting into the bloodstream, which leads to this chronic state of inflammation. Inflammation, again, just being your body's response to an emergency state. For example, if you eat foods that are super high in sugar, let's say, some gigantic soda or something like that, your blood sugar will spike like crazy. That is an emergency state to your body. Sugar in the blood is toxic for prolonged periods, so your body will release insulin to bring your blood glucose down. So that's an example of inflammation, but we get other types of inflammation here where things that aren't supposed to be in your bloodstream, undigested food particles, unwanted proteins like gluten and casein, for example, can lead to chronic and systemic inflammation, because those things aren't supposed to be in your body, or at least in your bloodstream, unless your body broke them down properly. And if they are in your bloodstream, your body attacks them. You also get too few nutrients absorbed through the gut. Along with this chronic inflammation, it becomes harder and harder for the lining of your small intestine, which is supposed to absorb nutrients. It becomes much harder for the lining of the small intestine to do its job properly, because the enterocytes, these cells that line your small intestine, become damaged and they can't absorb nutrients properly. Okay, so what are the symptoms of leaky gut? Now, this is really interesting, because typically people think, oh, well, if I had leaky gut, I would know because I would have some gastrointestinal symptoms. Not necessarily. And this is one of the main differences between functional medicine and Western medicine. Functional, approaches to things like functional diagnostic nutrition, which we practice here at CrossFit South Bend, and Western medicine. Western medicine will say, well, if it's not a gastrointestinal issue, you don't have leaky gut. Or, the only context in which they would look at the integrity of the digestive system is if there's a gastrointestinal issue. It turns out, though, that there are a lot of other conditions that are directly related to the health of your digestive system. Why? For so many reasons. Again, your small intestine is where you absorb the vast majority of nutrients that come into your body. It's also the main barrier between you and the outside world when it comes to things that you ingest. Over 70% of your immune system is located in your gut, and that's with really good reason. When you think about the exposure that we get to the outside world going into our body on a daily basis, it's from food. So your immune system is there ready to attack things that shouldn't be there. And if your gut is compromised, your immune system is compromised. And that's why it leads to so many other issues. So things that seemingly have nothing to do with the gut, like skin issues or brain fog or fatigue or blood sugar issues or high cholesterol or impaired liver detoxification, or poor sleep, or depression, or anxiety, or autoimmunity, or any chronic health condition, really, for the most part, can all be linked in one way or another to leaky gut. Now, does that mean that leaky gut by itself is sufficient to solve those things? If you fix leaky gut, you have thereby fixed all those things? No, absolutely not. But it plays a massive role in fixing those things. So it's something that cannot be ignored. It's necessary for fixing those things, but it's not enough. It's not sufficient. Just to take a particular example, depression and anxiety. All of your neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, GABA, there are others, those are all made from amino acids, proteins. If you are not digesting proteins properly, or if you're not absorbing proteins properly, you are going to have some type of neurotransmitter deficiency. And this can lead to and mimic the symptoms of depression and anxiety. So it's not to discount the fact that there are mental and emotional components to these mental health issues, but there is a very large physiological basis to these things as well that often goes overlooked. And you can actually test for these neurotransmitter levels and see how they correlate with how well you're digesting protein. More recognizable gastrointestinal symptoms would be things like constipation, bloating, diarrhea, acid reflux, general indigestion, and then lastly, impaired absorption of certain nutrients. Like if you take a blood test or urine test and you find out that your vitamin D3 is low, or your B12 is low, or your iron is low, you can be eating as much of those things as you'd like. You can even be supplementing with those things as much as you'd like, but it's not going to matter that much unless you are properly digesting them. Just to take a perfect example, iron and anemia. One very common cause of anemia is something called pernicious anemia, which is where your immune system attacks something called intrinsic factor in your gut that is instrumental in the utilization of both B12 and iron and all the rest of it. The point there being, if you're someone who has been told you have anemia and you're supplementing with iron and eating a lot of red meat and you're still not getting your iron levels where they should be, or your ferritin levels, it could be because you have a compromised lining of your small intestine. You have leaky gut. So that's a very, very important thing to keep in mind if any of those nutrients are low. So the headline with that is any chronic condition for the most part has some sort of connection to leaky gut. And in particular, if there's an autoimmune disease, it's nearly a guarantee that leaky gut is playing some role one way or another. How can I test for leaky gut? There are a number of really good tests out there, all of which, just by the way, we do here at CrossFit South Bend through our functional diagnostic nutrition program. And if you'd like more information, please contact us. The first one we're going to talk about is the lactulose mannitol test. This is a urine test, and basically what you do is you drink a solution of these two sugars, lactulose and mannitol. Lactulose is an unmetabolized sugar, meaning it's a sugar that's not utilized by your body, and it's something that's a bigger sugar molecule. And basically, when you ingest this, it shouldn't be showing up in your urine if your intestinal lining is the way that it should be, if it's not compromised, if it's not leaky. If you do this test and a lot of lactulose shows up in your urine, it's not a diagnosis by any means of intestinal permeability, but it's an indication that things could be leaky. Mannitol. Mannitol is an unmetabolized sugar, but it's a smaller molecule that mimics the size of nutrients that would be absorbed by our body. If you get either too little or too much of this in the urine, that can be a sign of impaired nutrient absorption. Secretory Iga. You can do this as a stool test. Our preferred way is as a saliva test because it's really cheap and easy to do. Secretory Iga is the most abundant immunoglobulin in the body. What does that mean? It basically just means it's the most abundant sort of immune protective cell in our body to ward off invaders. So Secretory Iga lines the mucosal linings of your body, things like the inside of your nose and the inside of your small intestine, and there are all sorts of other mucosal linings in your body. And basically those linings are there to protect you from things that shouldn't be in your body. In your nose, for example, the mucosal lining is supposed to absorb things like allergens and pollens and all those different things so they don't affect your body. If your secretory Iga is either too high or too low, that can be indication of compromised intestinal permeability. Either your immune system is working way too hard to fend things off, or it's been fighting for so long that now it's very low. Both of those can indicate leaky gut. The last test comes to us from Cyrex Labs. This is a much more expensive test to run, and it's a great test, but it's something you want to think about, just weigh the cost benefits in terms of whether you want to do it or not, but it is a really fantastic test. It tests for something called zonulin, which sounds like a character from a Star Trek or Star Wars movie, but it's this chemical messenger that's involved in regulating the permeability of your mucosal surfaces in particular, or your sort of barrier surfaces in your body, like the small intestine. So if you have lots and lots and lots of zonulin, your small intestine can become very leaky. If things are tight the way they need to be, it's at appropriate levels. This test also tests for antibodies against your small intestine, which is a very important thing to know if there's some sort of autoimmune attack going on that's preventing you from absorbing nutrients and leading to leaky gut, and that's a blood draw. Okay, so much information about what is leaky gut, what causes it, what symptoms does it lead to, why is it so bad? What can you actually do? Well, we'll probably talk about this more in future videos, but the headline is you really need to work with a practitioner to do these tests. It's often not just leaky gut, there are other things going on. There's hormone imbalances like adrenal hormone imbalances and impaired liver detoxification and food sensitivities. That's why here at CrossFit South Bend, we offer the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Program, which tests for all those things. And based on those tests, we give the person that we're working with a custom Dress for Health Success program, which is where we focus on diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. If you have some sort of chronic health issue you've been dealing with for a very long time, diet and exercise and sleep and all the rest of that stuff is great, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on beneath the surface with regard to hormone levels and digestive function and gut pathogens and food sensitivities that you need to test for with a qualified practitioner, and you need to work on in the form of reducing those burdens on the body and coaching up the things that are helping you out and making you more healthy. All right, guys, so that was a lot of information. Hopefully now you have a much better sense of what leaky gut is and all the factors that go into it. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.